not necessarily.
Said no.
Said no. And Kirstie looked at me. I was like, that's because you asked me to recommend it to someone
Tell
else.
you every customer services email that I've had in the last month of something that's gone wrong, and they are like emblazoned on my heart.
A good spa should make you feel at ease, and obviously for different reasons you might want a different experience, but I think that one is amazing.
It's the most intriguing, stunning decor I've ever seen. Focus. Do one thing, do it well, you will win. But your brain isn't set up to do that. Your brain is set up to continually find more crazy stuff. I think the impact for businesses is much more far-reaching from it than you think. As in, I still think now that we can really tell that happened, and I think we probably lost at least 5
Try
years.
something new. Like if you've never liked it, like in the format that it was at school, let's say when we were young, which was quite rigid and restrictive. It's not now.
Welcome to season 2 of the Leading Boldly podcast. We're on episode 1. Really excited to be back with you. I'm Matt Clutterham.
And I'm Jenny Jarvis.
Today, we're joined by an extraordinary husband and wife duo who are redefining the beauty industry with ethics, sustainability, and performance at the core of everything they do. Luke and Kirstie Sherriff, the powerhouse founders behind Proverb Skin, a brand that blends cutting-edge skincare with an unshakable commitment to sustainability. Luke's journey began on the rugby field, where his 11-year career as professional athlete first exposed him to the impact of skincare on performance. With a passion for health, performance management, and sustainable supply chains, he transitioned from elite sports to entrepreneurship, launching Proverb in 2017. His mission? To create high-performance natural skincare solutions leading to industry-first innovations like the UK's first refillable natural deodorant and body wash. Kirstie, a third-generation beauty expert, has been at the forefront of the UK's natural beauty movement for over 2 decades. Twice voted among the top 3 most influential people in the UK natural beauty, she has shaped the world of high-end spas, working with global luxury brands like Atlantis and Four Seasons. She's a master in spa treatments, product formulation, and education, helping therapists and clients uncover what truly goes into mainstream beauty products. Together, Luke and Kirstie have built not just a brand, but a movement, one that challenges the norms of the beauty industry and paves the way for sustainable, high-performance skincare. Luke, Kirstie, welcome to the Leading Boldly podcast.
How's it going? Great to be here.
And thank you for that amazing introduction.
Yeah,
it's a good start to our day.
You've just rewritten my LinkedIn bio.
I cannot tell you how many people have said that. Will you send me that so I can put it on my bio?
It's seriously well written. That's
what we do. That's what we do. So we love a good dating and love story at Q Branch. How did you two get together?
It's fairly boring in some ways. We met at university. We were friends. Kirstie studied history, was likely not to become a historian, it turns out, but it got her interested in Southeast Asia and traveling.
Took me to the land of lemongrass and patchouli.
And I managed to come out of university having studied human sciences and epidemiology, and played professional rugby, as you said. And at that point, our paths stayed close by, and we
had an amazing close group of friends. Luke was one of my best boyfriends, and so we have got a really interesting start in that we did the first 3, but Luke stayed for a master's, 4 years of university together as friends, as in we have seen everything that the other person did. We were there, we witnessed it, we possibly even helped it happen.
That's why Proverb's tagline is a statement of truth, because when we did our branding, they were sitting listening to us and they were like, is there anything you two don't know about each other or talk about? We're like, not really. And that's the way we want to communicate to our customers. That's what it stems from, like being able, as a young brand, but like you say, starting a movement where we can actually talk openly about what we do. Whether we do it brilliantly is not always the case, but we can at least be honest about it. We're not held by shareholders or other bigger issues. We can actually just get out there and tell it how it is.
But Luke was super lucky. He got his first professional contract at Harlequins in the Premiership while he was still at uni. So he did his last year. He was doing a master's somehow managed to get a distinction, a master's, and play professional rugby at the same time.
Is that when I became interesting?
Yeah, that's when I started to like him.
Might be something more to this guy. So from my own viewpoint, I've seen you guys around the village that we live in for the last 10 years. And I've always really admired the way you are together and as people. And Luke is one of the most positive, smiley, happy people. And you don't get that a lot. Nothing really phases him. So he's always quite a joy to see.
That's lovely. It's interesting you say that, because the Tony Robbins stuff we were just talking about, gets you to think about yourself in ways you might have not done for years. And it's lovely to hear that, because there are days when I think I probably am not enough like that, which might sound odd, because I think when you're 18 or 20, you just don't think. And I always say during lockdown, I did a very small series of stuff, just trying to help people through it, mentally, and find positives in it, and got some nice feedback. But what it made me realize is that I'm very fortunate. I had a very fortunate upbringing. It went as well as it possibly could. So I always think, if I can't smile and be happy about it, then sort of knowing what other people must be going through, appreciating that they may not feel that. And actually recently, when we've talked about this, we need to be even more like that. I think maybe in our content and get our energy out there through the brand. So yeah, it's nice to hear that it resonates.
I think I can remember really vividly on his 19th birthday. So it would have been the first year I knew you. So I drew him a picture of Tigger from Winnie the Pooh in his birthday card, because in my opinion, that was what he was. He was like living next to a 6'4" giant Tigger.
Yeah.
Nothing ever made him not be Tigger-like. And obviously we've got 25 years plus, and I have seen moments that can quell Tigger slightly, but Tigger's in there.
Which segues into what's it like being an entrepreneur, because that is the one thing that has definitely had its moments of I don't feel quite so bouncy today. But no, it's lovely to hear. And yeah, it is. I always see you and think you might remind me of all the times you worked with Kirstie and all the stuff you helped her with. So yeah, it always makes me feel good. And it is a shame in a way that more people aren't. I don't know whether it's British. I don't know whether we have an element of that. Having travelled a bit recently, even in Belgium, I think people are a little bit more open and excitable.
But
it's human nature, though, we congregate around adversity much more than we do around positive stuff. Because when things are positive, there's what's to say. But where things are bad, everyone's like, oh, everybody. I always talk about the bus queue. People stand in the bus queue and it's pissing down with rain and everybody's miserable and they moan about it. But if it's sunny, they either say it's too hot, or, they're happy in their own world.
I also think I've done a lot of analysing over the years of why he's like that and I'm not like that. Because you stand next to Tigger, it becomes quite clear that you might be Eeyore. And I do think, having watched that your early family situation, and particularly the neurolinguistic programming that you grew up in, is so crucial to all of this. And then how you overcome that. Because likewise, I was very lucky. I had a beautiful childhood. Everyone was healthy, happy. Everyone was together. But my mum and dad are more local to this area, and just they're inherently negative, just not in always the happy way.
They want to talk about
the bad stuff,
just like you said.
Yeah, and it's always bad before it's good. And if we're on holiday together, we can be in the most amazing place, and everything's bad until the moment we leave, and then it was like, oh my god, that was the most amazing thing, and you're like, we just spent 2 weeks complaining about everything.
Well, that might be where you start with someone that's got a business, because I think the thing we and I have struggled with is, and it's why that introduction is so nice, to remind yourself of the good stuff.
Yeah.
Because once you're in it, whoever you are, whatever business you're running, if you own it, once you are in it, it is very hard not to firefight and deal with the stuff that isn't the way you like it or isn't going well. And that's inherent in running anything. But it is a good analogy. I think if you can start the day by focusing on what's going well and how far you have come, then I think even we have learned that is the place and the way to go.
And I have never seen you as Eeyore, Kirstie. I've always seen you as really professional, really passionate about what you do and your mission. And I've always loved seeing your beauty videos, and your online presence is brilliant. So I've always really appreciated that. And the reason I was desperate to have you on the podcast, we have been trying for months to get a window in our diary where we could both do it, is because like you guys are a couple that I looked at and went, yeah, they're doing it together, like long before I met Matt. And I just loved that you were doing it together, and you're a real vision in our community, I believe, for something that's possible.
Just for anyone that hasn't seen us, as a rule, we are always together, like two little limpets.
Well, so are we.
Yeah.
We did a podcast about 10 years ago, and someone said, would you recommend working with your other half? And I said, not necessarily.
You said no.
I said no. And Kirstie looked at me, and I was like, that's because you asked me to recommend it for someone else. If you know that's what you want in your life and you can make it work, it is undoubtedly the best decision we ever made. If that's what you're looking for, and having seen you guys grow together, I think it's amazing, because if you find that person that you can do all those layers of things with, then why would you not want to spend more time with them?
And so many people say to us, oh my God, I could never do that. And the minute you've said that out loud, then please don't ever do that. Because if you know that, then it's not the right thing to do.
Yeah, I agree.
And if you do choose to do it, it has to come with the utmost brutality of truth. Like, we are brutally truthful about everything. And you have to develop this really weird skill of being able to just turn things on and off. And I think, in honesty, that got a lot easier when we had children. So we've got a 15-year-old and a 10-year-old now. And so in that 15-year period, you've got no option. You'd literally be at a laptop in your conservatory, and then you turn to the side and you suddenly become mom and dad. And so I think it has got a lot easier to just flick the switch when you walk in at the weekend, and the rest of it will disappear and go straight into that mode. So slight advocate of children can be helpful, yet also time consuming.
I also think with the kids thing, once they get older and they're less reliant on you, like me and Matt make such a conscious effort to do a lot of non-business stuff together. So we always create date weekends.
We're looking forward to that bit. We haven't got there yet. We're still stand at a BMX track, stand at the side of a tennis court, go to acro.
I wouldn't have it any other way. So
you wouldn't. And I don't advocate this for you at all, but separating from your husband, the father of your children, gives you a lot more space than you ever thought you had. So if we were still together, it wouldn't be the same.
My mum and dad worked together, and so I obviously saw a married couple working together, coming home at night, still talking about it, staying together. And I always used to say to them, what would happen if you get divorced? And they just look at me and go, no, too complicated. Couldn't possibly work out how to split all of this shit up.
Yeah.
I know people say to us, are you getting married? And we're like, well, we've got a business together. It's more complicated to separate now than if we were married.
And interestingly, sometimes when you look for investment, they can sort of pitch that as a negative, like a married couple or a couple together and relate in some way. But I've always said, like I think you've got more at stake. You're more likely to want to make it work. I know there's obviously examples of that going badly, but yeah, for us, it was just like, we're all in. Like, you might as well be all in.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So can you share the story behind how Proverb started? What inspired you to start?
Perfect. Well, I'll go. So Luke was merrily got an amazing rugby job while he was at uni, came out. I had a slight meltdown in that I realized that we were both at Oxford, that when you come out of Oxford, you're pretty much expected to become a banker, management consultant, or a lawyer. They were the three routes out. And I dipped my toes in and I was like, oh, no. And so my parents were in the hair and beauty wholesale industry. So they didn't make a brand. They were selling other people's brands, but it had been in my background and my grandparents' background. And so I decided that I would do a nail course and learn how to be Oxford's first ever acrylic nail technician, much to my grandma's
self-appointed. May not be true.
And so I ended up doing that. I started beauty schools. I used my academia to start teaching other people. And meanwhile, Luke was chasing a ball around. And they had a fitness and nutritionist.
Yeah, he's essentially now a holistic health expert. But when he started, he was just out of the army. I say just. He's really into performance, but looking outside the box, right? Not just lifting weights and the way you eat, but everything around it, like the people you spend time with, your attitude, as it turns out, toxins that might be entering your bloodstream that are going to affect your hormone system. So
The most burly, huge,
Not
muscly Welsh man that says the F word every second word. Talking to them saying, you're poisoning yourself with your deodorant and your body wash. Your cells don't need this. I need you to start saying kind of words to yourself. And obviously it all filtered home. As the girl in the house, the washing powders were changed, the washing up liquids were changed, things in your bathroom were changed. And at that point, it was slim pickings. We're in the early 2000s. Whole Foods hadn't arrived in the UK yet. There were a few organic brands, but they were very definitely in the retail market. It was Neal's Yard, Belida, and Dr. Hauschka, ultimately. And I had beauty schools. I was training 1,500 people to be beauty therapists a year at this point. And whatever I told them to use, they went and bought. And so I literally ended up in the schools pulling things out the cupboards once I went into this deep dive of what actual ingredients are in beauty products, and realized that I was pulling out beautiful spa brands, very well-known names. And once I realized what was actually inside them and bothered to read the ingredient list, I was like, oh, this is very expensive bottles and boxes with some very questionable things inside. And literally couldn't find anything to use because you can't take a retail product into a professional setting. And so I was a bit stuffed and I was like, what are we going to do? Oh, I know, we'll make one.
And that was actually our first brand. So Proverb's our second brand. Our first brand, which sits behind you on the desk there, is Pink's Boutique. And that was, as Kirstie said, what we felt was the answer to, in this case, a Soil Association accredited product for professionals. So it's still very much a professional product used by therapists and salons. Very excited it's used by our local spa, which you know very well, Breeden.
Oh, everybody knows about our local spa. We talk about them a lot.
It's brilliant. So that was our journey into producing products, and went remarkably well. So we've still kept that growing, and we still love that very much.
We were potentially very overconfident. We'd come through an academic setting that made us very confident. I then started beauty schools that flew, in all honesty. They're probably still to this day the most successful business I had, other than the staffing issue became critical crisis that I thought was going to put me into the Priory. And so I literally made the decision to stop doing it. I had a plan to extend to 10 of them because the service industry model and the maths was beautiful. But you can't cancel training. When you've got 8 people coming on a course and they've shut salons, they've put children into daycare, you can't cancel. And then obviously the number of staff we were going to need, we worked out on sick days. And I was like, I am going to pull myself to pieces covering all of this. So yeah.
So that was our foray into products, and then that was still while I was playing. So I got to help out with the finance and the operations, but I was still playing rugby. And when I retired,
got the odd spray tan when he had to be a model.
Yeah, but so that's which answers your question as to why I've never had a full facial. It's because I'm always like part used in different stages of the process. At the beginning where she's designing a new treatment, or like at some point where someone's trying it out on me. I have my own facial routine every day, but to actually have one of the Proverb ones finally was a joy.
It was really funny because you posted on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago with photos saying this is my first ever Pink's Boutique facial, and I was like, what? What is going on with this madness?
From beginning to end, like because.
I don't treat them
as it is when we go to these lovely places now. It's very rare that you're obviously getting a treatment. You're there as a supplier, so you don't want to take precious time, and that's why.
So Pink's Boutique was essentially our learning platform. What would probably have been more sensible would have been to have gone and got a graduate job for Unilever or L'Oreal, and to have actually worked in someone else's business making skincare for 10, 15 years before we decided to do it ourselves. However, we liked the hard way. So we learned, and Pink's Boutique was essentially our huge learning platform of how to do it, how not to do it. Roll forward to 2015, 16, and I would say I want to make another one. Pink's has got so many amazing points, but there was things I didn't like about the brand concept that I'd made and didn't feel I could get it into like supersonic 5-star spa and retail, and I wanted to go again ultimately. And
I wanted to crowbar my way into the story as well. So we came up with Proverb, which, as you said at the beginning, was really founded on my experience in the professional sport world, where you're always trying to get those extra gains. You're always trying to find the next best thing, and it's got to be proven to work. So one of the key things in our product development was we wanted to take the things that we would want in our diet sheet, as it were, we would want to absorb, we would want to work, but actually prove they work as well. So that's one of the key differences in Proverb, in that we spend some time and quite a lot of money finding the right ingredients, getting the data that prove they work, and then putting them in the product so that, you know, ultimately, and we'll come to this, I'm sure, the conversation about where natural and organic and ethical products are going, they have to ultimately stand up and prove that they work, as well as being good in other ways.
Yeah, we had this amazing journey in Pinks where we were right at the start of the wave in the early 2000s for organic and natural. And I think we were even surprised by how at the start of the wave we were. And it actually probably took about 10 years for it all to catch up with where we were. We started completely vegan in glass jars. It wasn't the kind of TikTok phasing that has come along that told you to do that. But what we noticed is we'd go into these beautiful salons and spas, and everyone loved the products and they loved the smells and they loved the textures. But there was always this but, which is, but for something to work in skincare, it's got to have a white coated doctor, a needle, some injections. And so when we made Proverb, we're like, right, we need to really do something to counter that side, which is, if an organic brand is ever going to make it to the real mainstream, people are more driven by their own results first than they are the sustainability and the organic side.
I always use the example of Tesla, who did an amazing job of making their car attractive and having cool functionality and being exciting, as in Charlie, our son, wanted one, and it was only 6 months later he found out they were electric. You know, the electricity part of it, or the electric part of it, becomes the bit that makes you feel good. But people buy stuff because it looks good, or they like it, or it makes them feel better than the next person, whatever it may be. But those motivations haven't changed a lot. So while we're super proud of what we've achieved, there's still a challenge in that the consumer is still looking for something that ultimately fits their eye.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We talk to our clients who we're brand building with all the time about how that in general the consumer is pretty self-obsessed actually before they're world obsessed. So, but if you can answer both, then you're on a real winner.
And I have seen products that are supposed to have all the labels and all the stuff, but you get them and they're just so dull. I don't want to buy it. It's like, oh yeah, it might work. I don't know that it works.
I think what's super important, if anyone listening is thinking of going into that ethical, sustainable space, is go with the mantra that they perhaps don't care as much as you want them to, and that they are not willing to compromise. If it is harder to use than its mainstream component, then it's not going to win. It's got to be just as easy as the...
Well, we're talking about the mass market, right? So there's always early adopters, those people that will go that extra mile to be more sustainable, which is amazing. But mentioning TikTok and our 15-year-old daughter, who has parents that run ethical and sustainable beauty brands,
a warehouse full of products,
and does use them, I'm proud to say, but will often come home and say, oh, I'd like this product off TikTok. And so, having been told that this is the generation that are going to make all the best choices, which is entirely unfair on them, to put that pressure on them. We need to make better versions of things that they can choose without realizing, that they're making, and they shouldn't be making a sacrifice. They should be feeling good about their choice, as well as getting something that's good for them. And then that's the win. I mean, that's what essentially, as I say, Tesla is a good example of.
Yeah, absolutely. So while we're talking about the younger generation, and not so much the younger generation either, and starting brands, you've done two, not just one, two. Brands are becoming, and entrepreneurship are becoming quite a thing, and lots of people are going into them. Tell us how brutal. Be brutally honest with us. Tell us how hard it was to build two brands from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, if you're thinking of doing it, let's face it, it looks very cool from the outside, and working for yourself seems to be the kind of goal for many, many people. Proverb means statements of truth.
Well, Kirstie said something earlier, interestingly, about, we could have gone and worked for a big corporation to learn the skill first. There's a danger in that, which is you see a big organization, you see all the resources they have, you see them producing amazing things, but you're a part of that. So you're like, it's called the E-myth. You're like, well, I'm the one producing the marketing, or I'm the one creating the product, and they're taking all the glory, as it were. But the danger of that is you then jump from that, which is a relatively, I won't say comfortable word, they're challenging places, but it's certainly an element of knowns. You know what's coming, you know what's expected of you, into a complete abyss of having to make every decision yourself, etc. So at least we were naive, and then when we went into it, and
I think for me and the work that we do with our clients, I think that was absolutely one of your superpowers, because I think had you gone and done that, I think you would have been bound by the narratives of the industry, and you completely weren't. So you've been able to go out and redefine what those narratives are. And I'm not sure that would have been so easy if you'd spent a couple of years in one of the big companies.
No, I totally agree. And
you would have had a wage, and then you have to be used to not having a wage. I mean, absolutely. That's probably the first thing to go, is that you have to be willing, and if you've not done it, you could not understand it. You have to be willing to be in a world where you do not know if you are going to be paid the next month.
Yeah.
And for most people, that is incredibly uncomfortable. And we've got a very good friend who happened to be the year above us at uni that Bulldog was his brand. If you've seen Bulldog, the men skincare. And he went on when he sold Bulldog to launch something else. And he and his partner decided that this time they were going to let their whole team, who they'd worked with for quite a long time, super capable people, they were going to let them in on all the maths. They were going to have complete transparency, so everyone knew where they were. And he said it was a complete nightmare. He said people just couldn't handle it. They literally were freaking out that they were going to miss their mortgage payments, that they weren't going to be able to pay for their child's birthday. He said none of them could do it. And they were people that he thought were like kind of typical A1 demographic, could handle this sort of thing. And he's like, they were broken. Whereas he and his business partner were like, okay, we'll just keep it in here then, shall we?
Yeah.
I do think there's a lot of sacrifice that comes with starting a business, and you have to understand where that sacrifice lies and whether you're willing to do it.
Just to ask you a question, for your clients that are looking at starting, is it mainly the lifestyle opportunity that it brings? Versus the potential of making
that's not what we go for. So our client base is really people who have a mission. So Proverb would have been a perfect thing on Pink's right at the beginning, where you have a mission, you have a goal, you want to change the world, and you want to do it in your thing. So we have all different industries, but they want to make a change. So it's not their driving factor, and they're rebels. So they're people that want to buck the system too. But a lot of them have been in the comfort zone of employment for years and years, and then they're coming out of it and they're going, oh, how do we navigate this? How do we get paid? And then fear sets in. I was saying last night, it's like you get in a bus to the seaside and you go through a really shitty town, and you get off the bus because you're like, well, it's going to be crap because like there's a really, and they're all this. You can almost see the sea.
The sea's over the next hill,
but they just kind of stop because it's like, oh, I'm not getting paid, or I'm not getting the clients, or I'm not getting this, or it's not a quick journey, is it?
No. And so it's interesting. The reason I asked that question is obviously people have different motivations, and for Kirstie, that would be fair to say, like that side of it was harder. For me, it was going from a really structured environment, i.e. professional sport, but it would be no different in a corporation where you sort of set tasks, you're measured on how well you do them, the task is completed, you move on, and if you're good, someone goes, oh, you were good at that, you can do something a bit more difficult, and that's sort of the institutionalized way. Whereas in entrepreneurship, as it were, starting your own thing, you are literally floating around, wondering which direction to put your energy in, what's going to have the most impact, whether you're making the right decisions, you know, and then on top of that, like endless things coming in. So you asked at the beginning, and people are like, is it hard? Hard's not really the right word. It's completely different. It is honestly, it's akin to having children and not having children. My sister recently, amazingly, has had a son by IVF. And before she started the journey, she was asking me, lots of tips and advice. I was like, I can tell you a certain degree of stuff, but and without being condescending, I can't really put it into context until you've experienced it. And that is probably the biggest problem with the E-myth, they call it, is, I can sit here and tell you what we do on a given day or how it makes us feel, and how it splits you in two most of the time, because you're like, who am I? Like, am I good at this? Am I terrible at this? Are we making money? Are we losing money? It really does test you in more ways than you can imagine.
It's like being on a relentless roller coaster.
And if you can't, and it's hard to describe, like lots of things, a bit like parenthood, a bit like lots of things. So, if you just have to go into it with really open eyes, that it will not be what you think it is. It's basically, and that's not a good or a bad thing. It's just, it won't be what you think it is.
And the challenge of the human psyche is that while you're on that roller coaster, you heavily register the lows and the dips. I could tell you every customer services email that I've had in the last month of something that's gone wrong, and they are like emblazoned on my heart. Whereas the couple of messages I've had where they're like see my point. The messages I've had where they were like, no, that piece of training has changed everything. I've done this, or it's the best deodorant I've ever used in the whole world. I've changed all my family onto it. They literally go, put-em.
I'm so glad you said that.
They disappear so quickly. And for me, and this is one of the things that we work on is like, how do you make those positives stay? Because also the challenge is, if you're not a born Tigger, that even when you're super aware of a high, so probably one of the most memorable Proverb highs so far has been this time last year. We stepped into the launch of Cyro, which is a new hotel group. It's their first one owned by Kirstie, who are the group that own One and Only and Rare Finds. And they have literally, if they've taken a Proverb brand booklet, they've basically made a hotel. They didn't, by the way, they did it themselves, but they have made a Proverb hotel ultimately. And we were super lucky that we found each other and we partnered. And so we walked into this building that is literally built for 360-degree health. The first thing you see is a running track and a gym before you see anything else. And top to toe, it's the first property that's full Proverb amenities all through the bedrooms, all through all the changing rooms. And we hadn't even seen the bottles. We walked in for the first time, walked into a bathroom and saw these bottles. But that should be the ultimate, let's get some champagne and have a drink. But in your head, because you're always ready, you're like, okay, but how long is it going to stay in here? What if they decide in 6 months they don't like it? How quickly are the rollouts of the other one coming? What if they open 10 all at once and we can't stop? We've got not enough stock for them.
Actually, what goes through your head is actually tiring, just to listen.
and that.
What were you thinking, Lee?
Yeah, what did you go?
I was like, that is an awesome view. Well done, us. Literally,
I just really love
and I don't know.
all of that.
I don't know whether it's a superpower having the two sides.
It is.
Or whether if you were just one version, you'd be better on your own.
Yeah, I mean, I'd miss a lot of detail because I'd just be too busy going.
They wouldn't get their next order.
It's a real superpower. And I love that you said that. I literally said to someone yesterday, why are you listening to the 3 people that have said negative things and not the 20 plus people who have said amazing things? So I love that you brought that up unprompted, because it's going to help a lot of people out there.
There's a really good song, and again, it's pop culture, but Baz Luhrmann's Sunshine. And it has a line in it about remembering the positive thing. If you can learn to remember the positive things and forget the negative things, tell me how. Because it's obviously not human nature, right?
It's not.
So in that sense, I maybe am slightly off key because it generally is always being the other way around,
So the learning should be find yourself someone off key to sit next to you, because they're likely to tell you that it's all okay. And also maybe simple things like, can you print out those emails? Can you stick them? Can you make some sort of wall that is like, these are good, and you come and look at them and remember those, because you are going to open up your email and the customer services next email is going to come.
Yeah, nothing's perfect, and you're going to want it to be because it's your dream and it's your passion. But yeah, being able to see the bigger picture and what you have achieved is pretty cool sometimes. So yeah.
So you've traveled to a lot of luxury spas around the world. What is your favorite?
Yeah,
are you allowed a favorite, or is it like choosing your favorite child?
Yeah, we slightly cheated because you asked us. We knew this was coming, so we have given some thought. We couldn't choose one because I think, like lots of things, there's different elements to the ones that we love for different reasons. We would choose different ones. For instance, I would choose Cyro, the one we just described, because focus around the fitness and recovery.
And they all have, yeah, it depends really what you're going for. So for instance, if you're a shopaholic, then in England, there's a spa up north called Rockcliffe Hall near Darlington, which has got the most beautiful retail space I've ever seen. Whereas if you're really foodie, and this is actually not because they're local, Breedon, the Breedon Spa has hands down the best food I've ever tasted in any spa.
It's awesome.
I totally agree.
It's a restaurant on its own. You could be going just for the food. And then if I had to put one where my heart is, and it always was, and then even more so, very sadly, the amazing lady Renee who created it passed away this year. So my heart is always locked there. In Leatherhead, there is a spa called Beaverbrook. So the Coach House Spa at Beaverbrook. And we actually met each other because we'd worked previously in the Amman hotel chain. If you've never seen them, they are something to look at. Most people are arriving on their helicopters or private jets. I had to stop training there once because Stevie Wonder had arrived in Turks and Caicos and needed us to do a manicure. And it's where George Clooney got married in one of the Italian ones, and David Beckham had his 40th birthday. They are
so they might be the most impressive, but they're not particularly accessible. Whereas Beaverbrook is, I think, probably the most complete in its energy and its flow in terms of like ease and being at ease, right? I think a good spa should make you feel at ease, and obviously for different reasons you might want a different experience, but I think that one is amazing.
It's the most intriguing, stunning decor I've ever seen. So the whole spa is, and it costs so much money, but it was all based around an amazing stained glass artist. So imagine the colors of church windows in a spa. That's really unusual.
In the spa,
really unusual.
Very cool.
So the tone of it is just really different to anywhere else. So they would be on the list. But ultimately, pretty much any of the ones that use Pinks or Proverbs, we're fair.
Yeah, you're very discerning.
That's amazing though. I was quite shocked by your answers there, because I was expecting you'd say, like this place in Mauritius, that place in Kuala Lumpur or whatever. But most of what you talked about was here in the UK.
Yeah, we do have very, very good spas. And
I think part of that is you don't have the location as much, right? If you've got a spa on a beach or in the middle of Dubai, they've got the wow factor because of the location and whatever. And that doesn't mean the spas aren't lovely, but ultimately over here you have to find, I think, a little bit more uniqueness and reason to stand out, because as you can see today, if you look out the window,
yes,
don't have blazing sunshine and 30 degrees.
No. Matt had his first spa experience last year.
I did.
Where did you go?
To Breedon.
Yes.
Yeah. And as a self-confessed foodie, I was very happy.
Right, so we just wanted to stop the podcast for just a few seconds to introduce you to our HQ community. It's for bold solopreneurs and small business owners who are tired of doing things on their own, because let's face it, success is a team sport.
We've got a great community already together of brilliant people. They are kind, they are interesting, they are knowledgeable, and they are already supporting each other. What we've seen in the group in just the last few weeks has been really incredible. So if you want to join us, it is the place to be.
Find out more and join now. www.qbranch.consulting/HQ. Remember, success is a team sport. Now back to the podcast.
So tell us what, because we've talked about it a lot, but we haven't really dived into it properly yet. Tell us what ethical beauty means to you guys. Because I think it's a phrase that's bandied about a lot. What does it mean to you?
You're looking at me. This is my soapbox.
I was going to say, if anyone's going to...
I think at its very top line, if you want to look at ethical beauty, what you've got to really understand is that ethical beauty should be beauty brands that are using the terminology correctly. And so there are pillars of the green beauty. There's essentially some really key words. There's natural, organic, vegan, cruelty-free, clean, non-toxic, sustainable. They are like the key words. And if someone, I think, is being ethical, the first thing is they need to use those words correctly. and not in a misleading way. You may have come across the term greenwashing, but the first thing I do with any spa, with any salon, with any therapist is actually teach them what these words mean and what they don't mean. The best example, for instance, the one that blows people's mind is vegan. Vegan is clearly very, very important if you are vegan. And so both of our brands are vegan. And it means there's no animal products, there's no animal byproducts. But somehow, because everyone put a green leaf, that somehow now the consumer believes, and all the marketing teams are allowing them to believe, that that means it's good for you, that that means it's green, that that means it's organic. It just means there is no animal byproducts. It could be 100% pure petroleum, totally vegan. And somehow there's this real weird concept going on with vegan in beauty at the moment. And the other thing that blows people's mind is you could technically be vegan, but not cruelty free. Mm-hmm. You could be vegan and still testing on animals. So it's very important that you know how they map out. The biggest one is natural versus organic. So if we took a clipboard around your local town today and asked people, are natural and organic the same? They reckon the stats are about 98, 99% of people would say yes, they are. And they are really not. They are both better than synthetic. Synthetic meaning it's been created in a lab and probably taken from an original plant source and then changed and synthesized to be much cheaper. But if you imagine you were both farmers. So Jenny has a natural farm and she's going to grow us an apricot, whereas Matt, you have an organic farm. And the crucial difference is soil. So you imagine you've got your apricot tree or bush or however the apricot grows with the roots going down into the soil. Jenny would be allowed to essentially put whatever she wants on her plants to make sure the yield is high, that the slugs don't get them. And so she will always make more. Whereas Matt, if you've gone through a certified organic system, then your watering can is completely controlled. You will be not putting pesticides or herbicides, very restricted on fertilizers. So obviously whatever goes into the soil essentially comes up through the root system into the plant. So the biggest challenge for us is that we will buy an apricot oil, which has come from Matt's farm, which is possibly 5 to 10 times more expensive.
Yeah.
But on an ingredient list, it just says apricot oil, just the same as everyone else's that says apricot oil. And how on earth do you get a consumer to understand that with a 3 seconds where they're willing to scroll in TikTok or 3 seconds walking past a shelf in Boots? And so, yeah, so that's currently where ethical beauty sits, but also it really depends on what's the top of your list for ethics.
And I think, as Kay said, being honest, I know it sounds obvious, but ethics is about the search for truth, I think. And so if you are able to be open about what you do well and what you don't do well, because no business I know of is doing it perfectly, whether it would be, again, we go back to Tesla, they're getting their batteries from somewhere, and I don't know how transparent they are about that, and whether they're digging it out of an ocean somewhere. So, it's hard. I think anyone that gets on a high horse and makes out that they've got a perfect answer and a perfect product, that's when you want to be wary, because I don't think they exist. So I think smaller brands are more able to be open about how they do things and where they can improve things. And obviously, I think bigger brands and businesses with shareholders are quite nervous. So I think that's one of the benefits of being smaller. One of the challenges, as we just discussed, is the cost of production. And if you're not at a certain scale and you're using more expensive ingredients, then you've got less margin to market and tell the story. So it's a bit of a vicious circle sometimes. The people with the cheaper ingredients with the bigger margin can shout the loudest
about being green when
about
they're not.
being slightly green, as it were. So that's probably the biggest challenge in the ethical space for us.
Yeah, and then the other thing, remember, is okay. So I could look at a Unilever and say I wouldn't ever use the ingredients you're using, but then at the scale they would have the power to go to the Chinese government and say, right, animal testing stops. We have to stop animal testing. Otherwise, no Unilever brand is coming in here. Or they could work with UNICEF and do something amazing on an incredible scale. So you've always got this balance as well, as like, yes, they might not be my ingredient version, but they've still got incredible power to do amazing, positive things if they want to.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love that
Yeah.
concept as well. It is all about what is important to you as a consumer. What are you bothered about? If you're bothered about a vegan and animal cruelty, you have to check that there's no animal cruelty going on, even if it's vegan.
Yeah, so it's about how you get to the truth. And I think that's probably why we use the word proverb, which is statements of truth, because more than anything, we're like, just someone really needs to be really clear about the truth of this. And also things in skincare, for instance, and no brand ever wants to say this, apart from us and all our therapists, is that it's just as important, if not more, what you eat and drink and how you sleep and how much you're on your phone and how much you're squinting when you're looking at a phone, as it is the cream that you're putting on your face. And the real magic is when you can do all of it, which is a 360-degree health model, which happily is coming more and more to the forefront in spa world.
It literally doesn't make any difference what cream you put on your face if you're smoking, drinking, and eating rubbish.
Yeah, it's a big lift. It's the icing on the cake, and it's a great feeling. And we use treatments and routines that add other things, like the way you massage your face, the way you put on the product, the way it makes you feel while you're doing that, spending some time. And again, that's why spas and places for well-being are so important, as you said earlier, finding that time for yourself. But yeah, it's the top of the pyramid. There's lots of other things below it we should all be doing, but we should be doing those for our general well-being and health.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
What are your thoughts about younger people and skincare products? Because this seems to be quite a big thing with TikTok now. There's like 8-year-olds wanting to buy loads of skin cream, and
we have another very good friend. Weirdly, we went to university with Simon that started Bulldog, and then there's a skincare brand called Pi for sensitive skin, and Sarah, who founded that, I went to school with. And we've had some quite interesting conversations. She's done a brilliant thing getting young children into her factory and try and explain some of what Kirstie talking about, because they're Soil Association, because she is adamant that we shouldn't be selling skincare to teenagers, and certainly 8-year-olds. And somebody sent me a link on TikTok the other day.
I slightly disagree with it.
For an 8-year-old who has a TikTok following and wants to make money and therefore make a skincare brand. So I was like, oh, you should make skincare for them. And I was like, no, I'm not getting involved in something that. Those other pillars that we talked about are where we should be focusing on our children's health, not on selling them more.
I don't know if this is just me, but if you've ever stood and looked enviously at a child's skin. I was putting Charlie to bed last night and I stroked his face and I was like, oh my God, I want that. At the point where you can still look at a child and their skin is just A1 perfect, as in they're in this magic period normally until they're 10, 11, where the amount of oil their skin naturally produces matches exactly the rate their skin cells fall off, and you just have utter perfection. That should not be touched in any way, shape, or form. So 8, 9, 10, touching that, you're just ruining literal perfection already. What then happens is, obviously, as the age of puberty changes, and this is where it becomes difficult to say teenager, because it can happen to some people at 10, it doesn't happen to some people till they're 14. As soon as that balance is quelled, so around every hair on your face, there's a sebaceous gland. If you look at an AMP map, it actually looks like a set of testicles at the bottom of every hair, and it squirts out sebum, which is your sebaceous oil that sits on your skin. As soon as that starts to go out of control, then I think there is definitely a place for skincare. And if you're looking after a child, or they're your child, and you're ignoring that and they're starting to get spots, then that becomes wrong for me, because you're not helping them. They are going to end up with serious acne, which unfortunately, other than just the pure skin of how bad their skin is, and it's how impactful that becomes on their self-esteem. So I think as soon as you see that change, something's got to happen. But, and this is the huge problem, is that the world of TikTok and the brands that are winning are brands that are led predominantly by packaging.
Yeah.
And the reason they're winning is because they look so cool and they look so amazing. And as a general rule, when something looks really cool and amazing, you should just presume that inside it might not be as good.
And is cheap.
Exactly, because
they're targeting that market.
They've got to have this very expensive, very cool, fluorescent, big plastic thing to house the liquid. And so, yeah, that's what we need. And it really is, you've got to be educated on what to look inside, and how do you get people to ignore brand and ignore incredible levels of brand. You're seeing, I mean, there's been one recently in the hair industry where you've seen a young girl turn over £4 million in a number of months because she's got so viral on TikTok. And by the way, I haven't looked at those ingredients. I don't know anything about that. But how do you get a 13-year-old to ignore that?
Well, and the thing that you haven't mentioned is that if you were to consult, which you have done for some of Alayla's friends, you don't just look at their skin, right? You look at their lifestyle, you look at whether their phone's got dirt on it and that's contributing, whether they're cleaning their pillows, how much sugar they're eating. There's a whole load of other things that you would do, which is not happening if you're buying a cheap product off TikTok. You should probably get in America, they call them anesthetist. No, not anesthetist.
Estheticians. Or here they're therapists.
Therapists. Like, you'd be better off going, if you have a concern, you'd be better off going to seeing a therapist and having a consultation with someone that having a facial. They may not be able to have one at a certain age, but they'd certainly be able to give you some advice. And I think that's the big concern. Is that
my girls have got absolutely stunning skin, like beautiful skin. But I don't know whether it's because they're naturally gifted or because of all the stuff that they actually use on their skin. One daughter's obsessed. Every week something comes through the post, it's another skincare product. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I think the biggest takeaway when you've got teenagers is getting them to understand it is literally your biggest organ. And it represents itself because of everything else that's happening in your body. So everything that goes in, everything that you're drinking, everything you touch, all the ways you're feeling, it is a representation of that. So it's never just as simple as a bottle.
What's been your biggest challenges? Just in business in general.
Going back to the beginning, when you were talking about as a couple, one of the challenges we have is, and it's quite rare, it took us a while to figure this out, is when we need to make a decision that we don't agree on. And we used to think early on that it was a big problem, and it can be, but it's actually, when you do the numbers, it's very rare that we don't agree. And that's not necessarily a good or bad thing, but that just means that there's so many decisions that are made seamlessly without thinking about it. Yeah. But when you've only got two of you and you then have to make a decision and you're not quite on the same page, that for us personally is a big challenge.
So I think that one, I think margin is literally hampered and been a huge challenge to us from every step we've ever taken, because we take such expensive ingredient choices and it's near impossible without an hour to get someone to understand what's inside it, and even harder to get them to believe that that's not what's inside an Elemis bottle or something else. So that's a big thing, very specific to being organic skincare. And then I think personally, I think the speed and how long everything takes is really hard sometimes not to represent feel that as failure in yourself. As in, I'll spend a life where I walk into a spa, which is an incredible 5-star spa, and all the therapists look at me and they think I'm just the trainer in inverted collars. And then it will come out and they'll find out that I made it and I wrote every word on the box and I chose all the colors and I did this, and they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. And all I stand there thinking is like, okay, but it isn't this side, or it isn't this. So it is amazing how long it takes. And so one of the things I'm working on at the moment is how you need to really focus, again, another daily activity, on the fact that everything you've done, every step is part of that journey. Even the bad things, even the negative things, enabling you to get to where you are now. And I think as well, our background of having been in Oxford and seeing where our counterparts now are economically, they are on very, very big salaries 25 years later in incredible places. And I think just not Tigger, but for me, that was always something I was like, oh, should I have done that? But you then have to think about really envisage what they've actually had to do. And would that have been me? I certainly wouldn't have been walking around a village holding his hand, making sure I could pick up my children and then do another 4 hours work afterwards.
Yeah. And I remember there have been times when you've gone, oh, Jenny, I've just got to go home and fill like 500 pots of testing stuff that are all sat on your dining table because it has to get done.
Yeah, and you talk obviously to people about getting a message out there and having a brand that resonates. You know, it will always feel personal. You know, even if the brand isn't your name or isn't immediately identifiable with you by someone else, like Joe Malone, obviously that's her name or whatever it may be, but you're still going to feel personally about it. You're still going to feel very personal. And we always joke about having kids to date, touch wood, they're far less traumatic than having two visitors. Like, you know, our children have been and continue to be an absolute joy and an absolute privilege to have. And so is having a business. But
that should probably put in context how difficult having a business.
Well, it's funny because when you started to say that, I was about to say, yeah, well, having a brand's a bit like having another child, isn't it? And then you went and said, actually, it's much worse.
Well, also, when you've got two, it's worse because in some instances, they work and complement each other very well most of the time. But there are points where you have to pick one child over the other, which you try not to do in real life. But with your businesses, we have one. I won't tell you which way around it is, but one that's historically been much more needy and much more like throwing tantrums and screaming and wanting all the attention, and then you feel sorry for the other one that's like being really diligent, paying the bills, and then the other one
stamps its feet.
Really, like this was children, I'd treat them entirely different. The one that was being a pain in the backside, I would have put in its place a long time ago.
I think as well, if you've got yourself to that entrepreneurial space, I think the other. And I think this is probably something I do more than Luke, because I am probably the more pure creative. Is it's really hard not to have the next idea. And so you're stuck between, you'll listen to lots of self-help things and you'll read lots of books where they're like, focus, focus, focus. Do one thing, do it well, you will win. But your brain isn't set up to do that. Your brain is set up to continually find more crazy stuff if you're an entrepreneur. And also if the one you're focusing on hasn't quite hit the target you wanted to, you haven't been able to move house, you're still in the house you've lived in for 15 years, you're like, well, okay, well, maybe I'll do this one, this shiny one over here will do it. And so I can't, and I will not know until the end, whenever that is, whether the ability to maneuver, and if something doesn't work, to change pathway, and something doesn't work to change pathway again, will become another superpower, or whether it's the biggest risk and failing that is there.
And to that point, as I'm sure you tell people, you have to have a goal.
Yeah.
And it has to be quite specific, because how you get there, and I've heard this said lots of times, but it is true. Nobody knows how you're going to get there, even though you think about it and you've got a plan. And Kirstie used to hate writing business plans. She's like, why am I writing a business plan? Like, it's just never going to represent a business plan. I'm like, I know, but you have to at least have a starting point, and then, as you say, be flexible enough to get there. And again, like the other challenge of having two is that, unlike children, you feel like you could quit on one.
You could send one to the orphanage.
Exactly. But then inevitably you can't let go. So I think that's, as Kirstie said, that's quite difficult. So just try and stay focused on a goal. And it may be that the product changes and it continues to evolve, but you have to have a core as to what you're trying to achieve and be very clear about that before you start anything.
One of the things I really remember that stands out for me is when COVID happened and we went into lockdown, and our whole village was just covered in Proverb. It is Proverb, hand sanitizer. And that must have been, thinking about that as a wider scale, that must have been quite a difficult time for you guys as well, because all of your stuff's in spas and nobody was going to spas.
Yeah, I mean, it will be one of those moments like when people say, where were you when the Twin Towers went down or JFK was shot? Or I remember being in the warehouse on the Friday afternoon and having a business, and then on the Saturday morning almost not having a business.
Well, you didn't know what you had.
Yeah. And we did. We
sat on a sofa with a spreadsheet, because at that point nobody knew. We're like, what does it look like if spas closed.
So obviously this would have been March, and Luke said, right, I'm going to do a spreadsheet through to September and put in 0 income for every month. And let's see what this plays out and what this looks like.
Yeah. Anyway, it was the first mild panic attack I've ever had, where I was just like, for 20 minutes, I was like, yeah, this could be quite difficult. And
it didn't help that Luke's master's was in epidemiology. So while everyone else was sending messages going, oh, I'll see you in the pub in 3 weeks, mate, Luke was looking at me going, Kirstie, this is 3 years. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, if it's a pandemic, it's 2 to 3 years, the end. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, because it's funny, because you said, you did a spreadsheet right on day one that went through to September. I did the same spreadsheet, but mine was 6 weeks. And then 4 weeks later, it was like, oh, I better do another 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And ours was way out. I mean, spas were gone for in really total almost 2 years.
So sanitizer, it turns out, in moments of being grateful for things.
Yeah, and this is a moment where actually I've always, if I'm negative about myself, I say we do too many things. Like we've got Pink's Boutique, we've got Proverb, but within Pink's Boutique, we've also got decor. So we've got things like sarongs and pedicure bowls and spoons. And you can literally play in phases, can't you? So we had a huge sanitizer phase.
Yeah.
Until we basically ran out and couldn't make any more.
Yeah.
Then when the salons realized they weren't opening again, a lot of them went decorating.
They had grants as well.
So they got their grants and they were like, right, fine, I'm going to refurb the salon. So then we had this decorating season where people wanted sarongs and pedicure bowls. But obviously at the same time, our sources of that was stopping because it was coming out of Asia.
And online as well. So that also in the deodorant world started to grow. And so, yeah, we were able to, as exactly like we just described, we were able to adapt through something. But I think that the realization, or the lack of realization, that although I felt I knew roughly how long the immediate impact was going to be, it's quite hard to really measure how much impact's been like in terms of where we would be now as a business if it hadn't happened. If we hadn't had to down tools and readjust and all those things, nobody will ever know. But yeah, I think as a generation, those are the things that I'm sure in years to come, they'll do the analysis on it. But personally, it's quite hard to survive something. And there was a relief in surviving it. And we could quite honestly, like lots of people have lost their business. So super grateful for that. Hard to know how far behind where we might have been.
I definitely think, the impact for businesses is much more far reaching from it than you think. As in, I still think now that we can really tell that happened. And I think we probably lost at least 5 years, I would say. Yeah. Flip side, we've seen others that it was a massive win for, and that they used that moment in the crash of Facebook marketing to boom. So yeah, everyone had their own journey for it. Yeah,
absolutely. While we're talking about evolving, how are you seeing sort of consumer demand and consumer thought around ethical products changing, particularly since the pandemic? Can you see sort of big shifts happening?
Yes, as I said, 2008, 2009, we launched Pink's Boutique. We were far too early for it here. Yeah. It took at least 10 years, I would suggest, until the mainstream, the social media, the general public seemed to be catching up. And I still think it is really definitely increasing. The desire for it has become almost normalized, in that there's almost now normalization that something should be natural. But that, like we said, comes with its own huge problems of, that means then all the very big brands have found a way to make things appear to be natural. And so I do think actually as real organic natural brands, I don't think it's actually that safe a place at the moment. I don't think it's a great place to be. I think it was lovely when it was going up and we were the real ones, but now everything looks like it does what we do. So if you've then got no marketing budget because you're still ethically putting those ingredients in, then what do you do?
I mean, I don't have the data on this, so this is purely anecdotal, but if you listen to TV ads or radio ads, the amount of brands that talk about sustainability and wellness and manage to crowbar it into energy production or supermarkets
or banks
or banks, and it's good that it's sparked people to think about it in their environmental social governance and the way they treat people and all those things. But you've also got to wonder whether they're just taking advantage of a zeitgeist, and they're big enough to do it because, as you said, coming out of COVID, people were thinking about wellness and their own personal journey and what they wanted out of their life, which I think is hugely powerful. I think, as Kirstie said, we're in a slightly vulnerable position, as in I think it will consolidate to a few, originally and traditionally, ethical brands that are independent, either being bought up or fighting their corner, and other smaller ones potentially not surviving, just as they lose their voice amongst more and more people clamoring to get involved with these positive words, but whether or not they're doing it, as we started from the beginning, whether there's any element of greenwashing or the equivalent in well-being. You can put well-being on the front of nearly anything. Toothbrush can be for well-being, and not rightly so. Healthy teeth is really important, but whether you should be selling it as that, I don't know.
And I do think that if you asked any spa person, that we definitely know as therapists that there is bigger demand for treatment than there was before COVID. And particularly the treatments to try and relax, try and stop stress, try and be healthy. I think people are everyone had this moment of going, ooh, dying is a possibility. What do I do to not die? So I think that should be a really good thing for human health, because we desperately need it in the Western world. It's just making sure they get the right stuff.
And on a personal level, my fear in the wellness space is that it will become more and more complicated when the science will just prove more and more that Granny was right. That if you eat a balanced diet, you sleep well, you hang around with positive people, you have a passion and a goal to keep.
Don't have your phone in bed.
You exercise regularly. That's what keeps you alive. And so that's my fear, that all these people getting into it, and technology is not necessarily a bad thing, but all these people getting into that space are going to overcomplicate it for the consumer, and if anything, drag them away from maybe what we did find in COVID in moments, which was togetherness and simplicity, and focusing on the things that are really important. Hopefully people can not get dragged away from that and understand. All the books I read of 2 or 3 on how to live longer pretty much are just repeating science, which has been done to prove what I think we all know already.
We all know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I always think when I go shopping for stuff, you're in my mind quite a lot when I'm shopping for things like hair, shampoo and stuff, because when it says natural on the front, I always think, remember Kirstie says water's natural? Because I remember you saying that to me. Water's natural. There's lots of natural things out there that you don't necessarily, doesn't mean anything on a bottle.
And also, chemical is not bad. Like, we are all bundles of chemicals. Water is H2O. Like, chemicals are not utterly evil. Like, that's the other thing people have got to remember. So when people are saying things like chemical free, like, this is just impossible. It's not even a thing.
It's just again going back to talking about what's important to you, what you want out of it. If you want really shiny, like flowing hair, and you don't care what's in the bottle, then you probably should you need some synthetic ingredients. If not, then you can look at the other elements that make it up to fit with your ethos.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think the trend that I'm certainly seeing in the wide brand space outside of health, beauty and wellness is that there is a shift, which I think is going to accelerate towards people just wanting truth. Like, I think consumers in general are sick of being lied to by particularly the big brands. And I think we are going to get more and more to a point where big brands are going to have to go more down the route that you have, because people just won't put up with the lies.
Let's hope that's the case. Just for humanity in general, it would be good to get to some of the truth of what's going on, and make decisions based on that. And as you say, you can then live your own truth. If you want something different out of life, or out of a relationship, or out of a brand, then you should at least know where to go and get that, and know who you can trust to get it.
Yeah, and it is all personal choice, because the really obvious one that I always sit there and say is, I clearly put highlights in my hair, and I know that chemical process is not a set of nice ingredients, but I am making the personal choice to do it, and I balance it with all the other things that I do. And just as long as you know which ones you are choosing and what you're getting, then it's yours to choose.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything has to be about personal choice.
Yeah.
what you listen to, what you pay attention to, who you hang out with. So many people think those choices are not choices, but they absolutely are.
Yeah. So what are your hopes and goals for Proverb in the future?
And Pinks.
And
There's
Pinks.
two babies.
Yeah,
Two babies.
that's a very good question. I think I personally just want to see them continue to grow, and I think the COVID thing did put a bit of a stall on that. I definitely did. I think we've kind of got ourselves into a space now where we're really passionate about the brands and the message and the product, and there are people out there saying lovely things regularly that you have to remember. And so, yeah, I think we would just like to see some more consistent growth, and then that's on a personal level as well, because obviously as you get older, you have different demands on your life, you have different things that you need to pay for and fund. But that's never been the ultimate goal. So trying to marry the two, I think, is a challenge. So I think if it can continue to trend in the direction it's going consistently, a bit of consistency is what we're after. Consistency in our action, consistency in our intent, and consistency in hopefully then the outcomes, right? But you have to put the intent and the action in place first. So I think if we do that, then the message that we have will resonate with the people that are looking for it.
Yeah, and I think for me, for Pinks, I have an amazing opportunity in Pinks, not to sell product, but actually to change therapists' lives, because Pinks goes to a lot of independent therapists, people that are making businesses on their own, and they are on their own. They're doing exactly what we were all talking about on their own in their beautiful hut in their garden, but also predominantly women, predominantly also trying to look after their children. And so I think I've got an amazing space to kind of help empower and serve them, get them some bottles because they clearly need some bottles, but it's more about what we can actually do for them. And then what I'd really like to see in Proverb as well is the refillable deodorant becoming cemented as the sports refillable deodorant, because we've got some significant competitors in that market that are very much in the pastel, love heart kind of very much positions. And yeah, I think what we've maybe not shouted enough about is that really was made by athletes who needed it to do what they needed it to do on a sports pitch, and it's then there for everyone else's armpits. So that's my goal. I want to be the sports refillable deodorant.
Brilliant.
I really think that you both embody your brand, and that's what's great about everything. And I'm quite new to the whole branding thing. It's not been my zone of genius at all, but I've always felt a real, there's no disconnect for me in what you present as your brand and as you as people. I think you completely embody it. So you've always done a great job, and I've always admired that great job. So just keep going.
Well, that is thanks. And yeah, I'm looking forward to following your journey and subscribing to the podcast and hearing lots of other amazing stories.
There's some really amazing stories. If you haven't listened, we've had people from all over the world. We had a branding guy from Disney on. We've had amazing guests. So you're adding to a very exclusive club at the moment, which is really nice. We've got a last question, Matt's favorite bit of the show.
Yeah, my absolute favorite, because I get to be on Radio 4 and do my Desert Island Discs part.
Yes.
Can you please give us one book, a piece of music, and a tool or framework that has really changed the game for you guys that you want to share with other entrepreneurs, people starting out?
Good.
We'll do our own ones.
Yeah.
You get two for the price of one.
Yeah.
There you go, Ruth.
Okay, book. So I know a lot of people can be quite negative about this book, but a long time ago, and it's actually propping up our computer screen now, it's still here. We read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week. And a lot of people are negative about it because they're like, well, that's ridiculous, 4-hour work week. And I think the thing to know is it's clearly never about really the reality of working 4 hours a week. That is very far from what happens. But it really framed for me one of the ways I could look at life in terms of running my own businesses, which was not about getting to a point of retiring. So he's very much about, you can't see this as something to retire. The stats on retiring are awful, of how many people get depressed, how many people die really quickly. He's like this, if you look at life expectancy stats in Japan of how people kind of keep their meaning and their position in the world. So it was about not doing it to retire, but really making it work for you along the way. And so when Layla was 4, we read the book the year before. And when Layla was 4, we managed to convince scallywags, convince everyone around us that we were leaving for 4 or 5 weeks. And the idea is that you take away your spend in pounds and convert it to pesos ultimately, wherever you're going. So we relocated to Bali when she was 4, and it was one of the most incredible experiences. And we were both still working, but it was about trying to do things like that. My music, in truth, I haven't got one single one. I very much phases with music. Am I not? My favorite ever, which was our wedding song, is Counting Crows, Mrs. Jones. Mr. Jones.
In this day and age,
I'm Mrs. and Mr. So that's what we came out dancing to, like too crazy.
That's a great track.
So that's probably my favorite ever. Whereas now, like this morning, I'm in a phase of I'm pink, never gonna not dance again, because I love dancing, and it's the one thing that I think is utterly lacking in my life. I never dance anymore. And my cheating framework, the only one that I've consistently had, is probably staying very close to Luke, who, as you may well have picked up on, is my own little mindset guru. And at the moment, right now, we're in a Tony Robbins phase. We're very late to Tony. I've known about him for years, but I've never done it. So we're currently now doing some Tony Robbins priming.
Awesome.
Nice. My book I'm going to pick is The Brain That Changes Itself, which I'll have to find the author and send it to you so you can put it in the link.
Yeah.
But probably read about 15 years ago. And I knew some of this from my degree, but reading stories of how plastic the brain is, how much you can change the pathways and the way you think, from people that have experienced strokes to other forms of abuse, to just more, practical and, neuromuscular, pathways. Like the fact that you are plastic in your mind and you can bend yourself to achieve whatever it is and become the person you want, I think is important for lots of people
Totally
to recognize about themselves. My music, I'm going to go with Baz Luhrmann, Sunshine, because if you listen to some of it, I just still think it resonates in lots of levels worldwide.
And everyone should wear sunscreen.
Yeah, sunscreen. Yeah, sunscreen. Exactly. That's exactly right. For all of those reasons, it's the one piece of advice that says it's undeniable. You should wear sunscreen. But all the other stuff in there, it just makes me laugh. We played it a lot at our wedding, which was in Thailand. And I'm going to cop out on it, just exercise, like just do some exercise, and it doesn't have to be what everyone thinks I do, which is not normally what I actually do. But it is just find some form of exercise that you like and like it, and it could be walking. My mum didn't get into anything other than walking. She used to have a dog until she was 60. Got into Pilates and yoga, and she's now in better shape.
Probably than I am right now.
Well, just in terms of what she wants out of life, which is flexibility, mobility, be able to get on the floor with the grandkids, etc. So find a form of exercise that you like, because it's a privilege if you're able to exercise to be able to do it. But you also shouldn't be a fad. It shouldn't be like, oh, I'm doing this. I get why people join High Rocks and all those other things. So find a motivation and goal is good, but ultimately find something you enjoy.
I think Pilates is probably one of the best exercises you can ever do if you can get to a class. I did it for years, brilliant. But then I couldn't get there because the class was always when I had clients or I had to take kids to school. There was always stuff. So I said yesterday to somebody, it's amazing that I found the gym literally last year and have really started enjoying it. I hated PE. Matt knows how much I hated PE at school because it's in my diary pretty much every day from 1993. Hate PE, had PE today, ruined my day. It's hilarious. But, just finding the gym and going, actually, as a 46-year-old woman, I quite enjoy this. That's a shocker.
I'll go further than that. You said this morning at 6:30, I think I'm actually a bit of a gym bunny these days.
Nice. There we go. And it will change with life. That's the other thing. Yeah. Be adaptable. My exercise routine in this instance has changed dramatically from when I was a full-time professional, and it has to sometimes match the rest of your life, which is getting up early to look after kids or not getting enough sleep. I'm fortunate enough that it's slightly coming back now, as we talked about, with children that are a bit more capable and a bit more time to fit those things in. So it's a bit more of a focus now, which is exciting.
I think the thing is, just don't be afraid to try stuff.
Yeah.
And I do like that thing about find something you enjoy, because there are so many activities out there, thousands.
More than ever. Like trampolining. Go to a trampolining park, even if you're an adult. Like paddle, just try something new. Like if you've never liked it, like in the format that it was at school, let's say when we were young, which was quite rigid and, you know, restrictive. It's not now. You can go and do anything you want. Go and take up base jumping.
Yeah.
Hardcore, whatever.
Absolutely. So before we let you go, is there any message that you two or your brand wants to deliver to the world that we haven't touched on?
A discount code.
Yes.
Sell.
Well, we're not very good at it often, but yeah. Anyway, your listeners get 20% off with the code Go Boldly on Pink's Boutique or Proverb, which again, you'll put in the link.
Amazing.
It'll be in the show notes.
So much for that. That's really generous, and it will be in the show notes.
No, I think obviously knowing the people that listen to you is that if this is something you'll think of, you just got to embrace the whole journey. And that's from someone that struggles at points to embrace the whole journey. Know that there is something that is not just friendly coming, and find the wins, find what it is in your life. And if you have a mission, then that is the biggest drive.
I'm laughing because I know after this, my response to this is, oh my God, we were awesome. And Kirstie's response will be a list of things we can do better.
You were awesome. I knew you would be.
She's already written 3 things.
Always be better.
She's already written 3 things down.
Yeah.
So at least bask in the glory for 10 minutes before you go and analyse how you can do it.
Brilliant. I love that.
I said to Matt this morning, I'm so excited about this episode because I know it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And I know you guys are going to be great. And you did not disappoint.
Yeah.
So thank you.
It's been totally awesome. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
And you've lifted our day immensely.
And also, like, as the universe so often does, literally, January was mad. We were like all over the place training and teaching. And then 1st of February felt like the beginning of the year. And it also coincided with me taking a deep dive into cryptocurrency. Then a deep dive into, I was ill, and so I was off work, and I was like, and then a deep dive into Tony Robbins, and it just times in very nicely of remembering the version we need to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great message to end on.
Yep.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much.
Oh, Jenny, your life's just one big drama. This was what my auntie said to me, and it inspired me to put all my dramas in one book. So if your life is full of drama, and I believe everyone's life is full of drama, this is the book with real stories, real struggles, real tools to navigate real life.